Welcome to the recorded version of Helping Seniors with Finances, part of the Family Caregiver Support webinar series brought to you by the American Society on Aging and a generous sponsorship from Home Instead Senior Care.
Our presenter today is Dr. Amy Dupree. Dr. Dupree, a gerontological social worker, is an internationally renowned expert on lifestyle issues relating to caregiving, retirement, aging, and family dynamics. She is president of Essential Conversations, Inc. and Dr. Amy, Inc., a company dedicated to family caregiver wellness. Dr. Dupree holds a PhD and master's in social work, specializing in gerontology, and earned her CSA, a designation for which she also trains others as part of their accreditation. Dr. Amy Dupree is a much sought-after speaker at corporate and professional events on the topics of caregiving, aging, and retirement, and she is also a frequent guest on radio and television. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenter today, Dr. Amy Dupree. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here and talking about such an important subject as money management. And today what I'm going to talk about is how you can help your clients and their families work to manage their finances better. And that's going to include showing them how to prevent themselves from being targets of fraud. Now, for most of us, money management can be a daunting task. Never mind then taking on a parent's financial management as well. The good news is there really are reputable services and firms that you can refer your clients and their families to in order to make money management easier. So money is an important concern for all of us at every age. But as you know, for seniors, money management and financial and estate planning are issues that must be carefully thought out. They must be well organized. And in many cases, because seniors' income often remains stable or even gets reduced, it becomes a challenge when health and medical care costs rise. So this idea of the stable income versus rising health care expenses, as you know, is on the mind of a lot of people today. Without careful financial balancing, some seniors are likely to put themselves at risk for illness. They do things like skip meals, or they don't take medicines that they really need because they can't afford them. They don't get their home repaired, and there are safety issues related to that. And they do all that to save money. They also may do things like forego socializing or taking vacations, and that can lead to depression if people feel that they have no options in their life. Others become so concerned about having enough money that they then take risks or let their guard down, and that's when they become targets of a scam. Senior scams are costing older adults their life savings, their homes, and in some cases even their lives. Now, seniors often worry they'll outlive their money, and they're concerned that they may not be able to continue to live the lifestyle to which they've become accustomed. And that sometimes is what forces them or causes them to get caught up in these schemes, because they're looking for ways to improve their financial situation, and they get desperate. I know as I say all that, it sounds kind of dark and scary, and it certainly can feel that way to clients and their families. So the goal is today to show you how you can help them be better prepared so they're less likely to be victims of those issues, and they're more likely to feel in control of their finances. So specifically, here's what we're going to talk about today. Today I'm going to give you some ideas that will help you show your clients and their families how to become financially organized. I'll teach you how they can pull together a professional services team so you can share that with them, that you can look at options for financing care and pass those along. And then I'm going to give suggestions about day-to-day money management and how your clients can do this better, how they can involve their families or not involve their families if they choose to do that. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how to prevent them from becoming victims of fraud. But first, let's start by talking about what is a good financial management team and how can they pull that together. As you're aware, managing estate and financial affairs is vital to a senior loved one's physical and financial health. And, you know, a lot of this is simply because of the time of life we're talking about. The truth is, all of us need these things in place, but they become even more important the older we get. You know, if we all knew the timing of our dying, we could put off doing these documents until right before that, but we don't know that, or our incapacity. That's why it's really a good idea for us to encourage all of our clients to do this. But certainly the clients who have older parents and our clients who are older adults need to be really focused on this. They need to make sure that their investments are protected, that their insurance is all in order, and that taxes are being paid. If all that's happening, it really will save them and their families huge amounts of headaches in the future. Also, good estate planning will ensure that the financial assets that are most important to your clients and their families, no matter how much or how little that is, go to the intended recipient as quickly, inexpensively, and easily as possible. I'm having the opportunity to do quite a bit of work professionally right now around this issue of estate planning and how do people do the proper preparation. My interest in this is from the conversation side, but I've had to learn the document side. And I have to say, more and more I'm convinced this is something that we shouldn't put off and that we should really encourage our clients and their entire families to take the time to do well, because it's rarely about the money that people fight. It's about the sentimental issues and the things that they get caught up on, and we, from a sentimental standpoint, and we have an opportunity to really encourage them to do good planning now. On the healthcare side, there are certain legal documents that we know can ensure that the senior loved one's wishes for medical treatment at the end of life are respected and fulfilled, so those need to be completed. Obviously, waiting until there's an emergency or a crisis to get any or all of this paperwork done can result in delays of care or release of funds that could otherwise help support and comfort these families at the time that they need it most. As I always say, you don't want to be dealing with the practical and the emotional at the same time if you can avoid it, and one way to avoid it is to deal with the practical up front. So to help ensure that everything's in order, your clients and their families really should work to organize a good team of professional assistants. This could include an attorney, a financial planner, an insurance counselor, and a tax professional, preferably a CPA or certified professional accountant. We're going to talk more about this team in a few minutes. From a legal standpoint, let's talk about the 5 documents that can assist seniors in a medical or financial emergency, as well as ease the distribution of their estate at the time of their death. Now, you're probably already familiar with these documents, but let's review them because you're going to want to review them with your clients as well. So first is a medical directive, which we commonly call a living will or advanced health care directive. And as you know, this document sets out what kind of care the person wants to receive if and when they become ill or incapacitated. And I think a real key there is incapacitated, because many times people think of this, a living will, as only the very last few days of life or the last bit of life. And actually people can be incapacitated for long periods of time. And this document is excellent at setting out what they want, if this is addressed in the document, if they make sure it's in there, in the case of long-term incapacity. Now, the second document we want to talk about is a durable power of attorney for health care and a HIPAA release. A durable power of attorney for health care allows the caregiver to make health care decisions for their senior loved one. And obviously, a HIPAA release gives them access to the senior's health records and physicians. So we really need to encourage families to make sure that they have done these documents. Many times I know it's very frustrating to families that they can't get medical information on their senior loved one because they haven't gone ahead and done this ahead of time. Third is a durable power of attorney for finances. That allows the caregiver to manage their senior loved one's financial affairs, pay bills, sell property, anything related to that end of things, while their loved ones are still alive. When I explain this to people, I say, if you look at the documents we're talking about here, these are really for your care while you're still alive. A lot of people focus on their will, which is good, but the will is about the quality of life of the people you leave behind. These documents are really about your quality of life while you're still living. And sometimes that helps people recognize the importance of having these documents. Okay, the fourth document is a revocable living trust, which allows the older adult to retain control over his or her estate while making transfers of assets to beneficiaries. So the senior can designate what property, like a home or investments, jewelry, etc., that goes into the trust and to whom it will be granted. The senior acts as the executor of their own living trust during their lifetime, so they maintain that control. A revocable living trust has an important advantage. It allows the estate to avoid probate at the time of death. That's the big advantage of it. The fifth document is a will. Of all the documents, that's probably the one most people have, even if they haven't done the others. So a will makes clear who will receive, obviously, the senior loved one's assets and personal property. And a properly written will helps to avoid disagreements over the parent's estate after their death. Now, I would supplement that by saying a great will is certainly important, but the conversations ahead of time are equally as important, because many times there are a lot of hurt feelings by things that were done in wills that nobody talked about. And there's a great line I like, which is that fair is not always equal, and many times people make decisions to take care of one child who needs care in a different way, but they never explain it. And that's where we see a lot of breakdown. So it's both having these documents and encouraging your clients and their families to have the conversations around these. Very, very key. Okay, so now let's talk about how your clients and their families can pull together a financial team. So in addition to an attorney, let's look at some of the other members of a good financial management team. If a caregiver has an older parent who has a financial planner or an investment counselor, it's really key that we encourage them to encourage their parents to check in with this person on a regular basis. And again, to remember that if the parent has not given permission for sharing of information, that the advisor is not going to be able to do this. So I think a lot of times family members think that if something happens to their parent, they'll be able to access all the information, but not if the proper documents haven't been signed. So checking in with the advisor is key. They want to make sure that their advisor has them in some low-risk investment vehicles so that a portion of their funds are accessible in an emergency if they should need them. A financial planner can also assist with making determinations about health and medical funding options, things such as reverse mortgages and life settlements. And we're going to talk about those in a few minutes. But a good financial planner can be a real boon to an older adult in keeping them in a good financial position throughout their life. If they don't have a financial advisor in place, they can seek out services at firms that come recommended by local senior care resources or through their banking institution. Banks will make recommendations about this. Having someone who's a certified financial planner, or CFP, is generally a safe bet. In all cases, what they really want to make sure they understand is how the planner's services are being paid for. It's also good to advise your clients and their families to get a second opinion on investments and financial purchases, especially if they're approached about changing any of their investments. You know, the American Association of Retired Persons, AARP, has a lot of great resources on their website. Encourage them to check out aarp.org. They can also check with the Financial Planning Association at fpanet.org. And I'll repeat that again later, but it's financial planning, FPA, Financial Planning Association, net.org, fpanet.org. The next member of the professional services team is an insurance counselor. Beyond health insurance, the caregiver can ask the counselor about the pros and the cons of long-term care insurance and whether they or their parent have enough or need additional life insurance coverage. The insurance counselor can also provide guidance on insurance investment vehicles, and they can work with the investment advisor to see if these opportunities make sense for the older adult's financial situation. It's always a good idea for the team to know each other and to be able to work together. Lastly, don't let them forget about the CPA or the tax advisor. It's easy for anybody to get tripped up by the new and current tax laws, and we know that these are constantly changing and will continue to constantly change. The older adult may be receiving certain funds or payouts that require them to pay quarterly tax payments, and if those aren't paid in a timely fashion, the senior could be subject to penalties that could deplete their resources. The cost of hiring a tax professional is really a wise investment over paying fines and penalties that really could have been avoided. Plus, it lessens stress, and it could help avoid having to go through an audit by the IRS. So certainly having a CPA who helps avoid all of the issues of taxes, tax penalties, and interest, and an audit is worth the fee to pay the CPA. Okay, so assuming that they have this great team in place, an attorney, a financial advisor, an insurance counselor, and a CPA, let's now talk about some options that are available in the event that your clients need financing for care. You know that this is one of the big issues that we know many older adults are struggling with right now. How do they finance potential care needs? As forbidding as this may seem, this challenge, we know that millions of seniors do get excellent care in their final months and in their final years. Generally, how they do it is it's a mix of resources, which include their savings and other programs. So let's walk through some of the options, some of which you'll know about clearly, and some which may be new. And these are great things to talk about your clients about, because some of them are more creative or, again, just may not be things that they've heard about. So many people now have heard about long-term care insurance, and this certainly has become an increasingly popular way of funding elder care. Right now, we have about 8 million Americans who are covered under these policies. The actual plans can be written in an endless variety of ways, and the benefits really differ, and whether caregiver expenses are covered differs, and for what length of time. So the truth is these plans tend to be quite complex, and there's a lot of things to weigh. The caregiver can bring in the assistance of their parent's professional services team, including the insurance and the financial advisors. They might also want to get the advice of a geriatric care manager. They also might want to talk to other friends to find out what their experience has been with a particular long-term care insurance. This is one of those products that's still new enough and confusing enough that we really need to encourage our clients to take a look at this carefully, see if the option makes sense for them, and also make sure that they get enough of a second opinion to know whether or not they're doing the right thing for themselves, because we know that these plans can be quite expensive. Now, a fairly new source of income that many seniors have taken advantage of in recent years, and this has to be someone over the age of 62, it's a reverse mortgage. So how does a reverse mortgage work? Well, assuming that the older adult has paid off the mortgage on their house, and let's assume that the market value of the house is $500,000, just for round numbers. What they might do then is enter into an agreement with the bank, who would in effect be paying them a mortgage, if you will, of perhaps $2,000 per month, and that would be income tax-free. So this provides money back to the senior. Now, typically what happens then is the older adult is allowed to remain in the home as long as they choose to live there and as long as they're able to live there. They would have to continue to pay real estate taxes. They have to continue to pay upkeep. They have to continue to pay any major repairs that goes on. And then if it's a couple, and if one of them dies, the survivor can also continue living in the house until either they die or they move in with family or long-term care. At that point, the estate would pay the bank the cash the owners have received plus interest and a fee. So it gets paid back at the end. Now, again, this is a product that's quite complex, and many people have very strong feelings, both pro and con, against this product. But for many seniors, it's a last resort, and it's their only way of paying for care. This, again, is something that needs, though, a lot of consideration, and your client and their parents should seek the advice of their attorney, their financial planner, before considering entering into any agreements around reverse mortgages. Another fairly recent senior care funding innovation is something called the life settlement. And that's when a person's life insurance is treated as an asset, really in much the same way as a house or a mutual fund. So what happens with a life settlement, the senior's life insurance policy gets sold to an investor while the policyholder is still alive. Now, it gets sold for considerably more than the cash surrender value of the policy, but a lot less than the face value. At the time of the sale, the senior gets a lump sum payment. Again, much more, probably about half of the face value of the policy, depending on their age and their health and other factors. The investor continues to make the premium payments, and when the person dies, they collect the full face value. So you can see that this can be an option to get money quickly, but that the person who really makes out in this is the investor because they get the full amount where the senior doesn't. Very complex, just like reverse mortgages, but I think, again, we have lots of people who don't have a lot of options, and this may be their only option. But this is another one of the opportunities where we say they should talk to a financial advisor and make sure they're getting very, very good professional advice before entering into any sort of an agreement like a life settlement. Now, more commonly, things that probably all of us on this webinar know are things such as Medicare as a way to finance medical care and health services. So Medicare, as you know, is a federal health insurance program that covers almost all Americans over the age of 65 for a pretty large share of their medical expenses, things such as hospitalization, doctor's bills, x-rays, therapy. The senior generally has to make a copayment for a part of those services, but these days many seniors have privately funded so-called Medigap policies to supplement Medicare. Medicare does not pay for non-medical care, including long-term care and assistance with daily living activities, except in a few instances. They will pay for portions of skilled rehab care, rehabilitation therapy, and limited care visits at home, but only if it is improving the senior's condition. So once the senior reaches a leveled out period, they stop paying. Also, Medicare will pay for non-medical services once the senior has entered hospice care. This is one of those things that I think many of your clients and their families do not understand, that Medicare does not cover long-term care except in the case of rehab. And I think that that's something we need to make sure everyone fully understands. Now, a newer alternative for seniors is a Medicare Advantage plan. This is a private insurance alternative to Medicare's traditional deductible and copayment systems, and it doesn't require a Medigap policy. Some Medicare Advantage plans have a small monthly premium, but typically much less than a Medigap premium. Well, Medicare Advantage plans can add services typically not covered by Medicare, which includes things like annual physicals and other preventive services. None of them provide any custodial long-term care coverage beyond Medicare's skilled rehab services. And again, we need to make sure that clients understand that. Medicare is a wonderful program, but it doesn't cover everything. As you know, many people get Medicare and Medicaid confused. They sound so much alike, and they are both healthcare programs. But Medicaid is a means-tested welfare program which is designed to help poor people of all ages, including the elderly. Now, for those over 65, it will help pay for nursing home costs once they've exhausted all or most of their own means. Typically, as we know, Medicaid eligibility comes into play after the family spends down a senior's assets until there's only about $2,000 left. So this idea is often, as you know, very hard for senior clients to think about the fact that they're spending down their money for care. Now, federal and state Medicaid laws have changed in recent years, and they severely restrict and penalize any efforts by seniors and their families to what they call artificially impoverish a senior, which means giving away or spending down a senior's assets simply to qualify for Medicaid. When I started in this field almost 30 years ago now, you know, we used to talk about them looking back only 6 months to see if families had moved money and transferred money. As you know, it's many years now, and that number continues to grow because we recognize that if families do that, and they become eligible for Medicaid, that it's a very expensive proposition for the system. So those are some ways to finance care, the ones you see on your screen. Now what we want to talk is about how people can help their parents or they themselves can better manage their day-to-day finances, and also how to manage in some kind of difficult situations. So money management. This is a key issue for many seniors. You know, I'm sure you've heard these stories many times of an adult child visiting their parent, and they notice unopened bills. They notice that desk that's in disarray, that bank statements are piling up, that there perhaps are some bounced check notices, things that show that perhaps money management is a bit out of hand. And it's a hard conversation to broach with an aging parent. how do I help you with day-to-day management of your money? Oftentimes, parents don't want their kids' help because they feel like they're giving up control of their life. They also feel like it's a reversal of the roles when they don't want to get into that. And often they're just very uncomfortable about other people knowing about their money. However, if the parent does agree, then their adult child can get permission to access their banking online, take over bill paying, financial management. One of the great things about the internet is it allows for family members who aren't nearby to help with money management because so much can be managed online now. The good news is, you can be living across the country or across the world and make sure that someone's bills are being paid, that their bank accounts are up to date, and that can provide a great deal of comfort to people. Now, one thing that's really key is if the adult child is really going to be part of this, they and their parents have to determine whether or not they're going to be on their bank accounts and what the pros and cons of that are. They may need to have a durable power of attorney for their parents that allows them to access their accounts and make changes on their behalf. All of those things need to be considered, and obviously there are pros and cons, and some people are concerned about doing this. This is, again, where professional advice is a really, really good idea. If the older adult is intent on managing their own, really it's not worth an adult-child arguing over this, but instead they should try to find solutions that work for all of them. So there is a great group that I want to mention because they're all over the United States, and they're the American Association of Daily Money Managers. And you can find this at aadmr.com. And these folks, for a fee, will help do the money management. They are professional money managers. That's what they do. And they're worth checking out their website and seeing if you have clients that this might be useful for. So that's an example of one way that an adult child can get the parent some help without they themselves actually being the ones to do it. So the professional services team, like the accountant, is another place to go to ask for some recommendations on this. At the very least, adult children should see if their parents will allow them to help get their financial files organized. Perhaps a pile of bills and bank statements is daunting, so they just avoid it. I know that's true in my life sometimes. It certainly can be true of an older adult who may be having vision problems, may be having trouble even opening the bills, and could be having cognitive issues. So if possible, the adult child can see if their parents will accept their help in organizing, helping set up priorities for payment, filing away forms that don't need immediate attention. And while they're at it, they can encourage them to allow them to make a list of all their accounts and put it in a place in their file where they can find it later if they need to. This is really about having things at their fingertips. We've done other webinars about how important it is to be organized in the case of an emergency. And here's another example of why this is so important, because if something happens and there is a medical emergency or the parent dies, and if there's never been a discussion about this, we know that it's often very daunting for the adult child to have to deal with that. Even better than having that list is if the parent will allow them to take copies of the list along with important estate documents such as wills, trusts, medical directives. That way they're able to access the forms quickly and easily. And you can assure them that if you're dealing with the adult child, these conversations are not easy, but they're worth having. And many times the best way to do it is just to say, Mom, my goal is to help you maintain your independence. And I want to make sure that if anything ever happens, that I can respond as quickly as possible to meet your needs. And I know it's hard to talk about this, and I want to respect your privacy, but I really think this is important that we talk about these documents. I want to make sure you have them. If you're not willing to give me a copy, can you tell me who has them? Again, this information most people will understand is key if something happens, and they're usually willing to have their adult child know some of that information. Now, of course, that's all dependent on the relationship that's been between the adult parent, or between the adult child and his or her parent forever. These relationships don't suddenly become easy in older years if they haven't been easy from the start. But having knowledge about where these documents are, if not having the documents themselves, can be very, very important. I think, again, reassuring the older adult that they will maintain control over their own lives is a really important thing. And also the whole issue about many older adults are concerned about not wanting to be a burden to their kids. And geez, if you have to help me with this, I'm kind of a burden. So recognizing that and addressing that and saying, this isn't a burden. I want to help with this, and it actually makes me feel better knowing where these documents are. So again, if they're not willing to talk with an adult child, they could suggest another family member. They could suggest a friend who might be help in this. But so the end goal being to keep the parents' finances organized, to keep them well managed. It does not have to be the adult child, but somebody needs to do that. And again, kids are often rather offended that their parents don't want their help with this, so you may need to do some reassuring on this. There's one other situation I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about, and that's helping seniors who have cognitive problems. Because as you know, this is a big issue, and it's growing in numbers as we have the number of seniors growing. So Roya Wolferson wrote an article on smartmoney.com which said that a Duke University study estimated that 14% of people over the age of 70 have some form of dementia, 14%. And according to dementia experts and victims' family members, the problems are often a lot more serious than forgetting how to balance their checkbook. People suffering from dementia have looked on as their investments have plunged in value. They've misread how much money they owe in taxes. They told their brokers to buy when they really meant to sell. There are thousands of cases already of seniors who have dementia who are trading stocks to their own detriment or investing in risky products that have led to losses of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a situation that really leaves everyone from brokers to financial planners to family members caught in a tragic bind about what's the best way to manage this. Because as you know, we really want to help older adults stay independent, but we also want to make sure they're safe, and protecting privacy and maintaining safety are difficult. John Gannon, who's the Director of Investor Education for the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA, the broker-funded agency that oversees brokers and security firms, said financial matters can become treacherous for people who may not even be able to spell their own name, which is often what happens when people have dementia. So what can families do? Well, one of the things that we can do is let families know that as soon as there is a diagnosis of dementia, that is the time they have to work to get the financial affairs in order quickly, because incapacity can come on quickly. There are a number of resources, general, legal, financial, that are available from the U.S. National Institutes of Health, the National Institutes on Aging. These can be found online at nia.nih.gov, and also do a search for Alzheimer's once you're on there. That will give some great resources about what to do in these situations. We know that helping a senior loved one who's suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's creates unique and difficult challenges. But even the most aware seniors can be taken advantage of. It's not always just people who have dementia. So let's talk for a couple of minutes here about common senior scams and how we can prevent these. So you see here 5 common issues for seniors that are fraud issues. This issue of fraud in the senior population is a really serious issue, and not just from a loss of money and savings. There's a whole emotional component to fraud that we don't talk about a lot. There's stress, there's shame, there's also fear associated with being scammed. It can have a really devastating effect on an older adult's health, their mental health. In fact, a Journal of the American Medical Association study showed that victims of elder mistreatment, including exploitation, have a 3 times higher mortality rate than non-victims. And that statistic was very shocking to me. So this is not an unimportant issue, and it's one that we can really help families with. So what makes the elderly more vulnerable to being scammed? Well, according to the FBI, there are several reasons why the elderly are targeted for fraud. First, we know that older adults are likely to have a nest egg. They're likely to own their own home or have excellent credit, all of which a con artist will try to tap into. second, if you look at who the cohort of older adults is right now, it's individuals who grew up in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. And they were generally raised to be polite and trusting. And unfortunately, the con artists will exploit these traits, knowing that it can be very difficult and sometimes impossible for these individuals to say no or just hang up the phone. Third, we know that older adults are less likely to report a fraud because they don't know who to report it to. They're ashamed, and they don't want to report for that reason because they're ashamed they've been scammed, or they don't even realize they've been scammed. In some cases, an older victim may not report the crime because they're concerned that relatives may now come to the conclusion that they've lost their marbles, right? That I no longer have my mental capacity, and they are fearful that their relatives will think they can't manage their own financial affairs because of that. Another issue can be that when an older victim, an elderly victim, does report the crime, they often make very poor witnesses. The con artist knows the effect of age on memory and is counting on the fact that the older adult will not be able to supply enough detailed information for investigators to do the proper investigation. In addition, the victims realize that they may have been subject to fraud. That realization might come up weeks after it actually happens, sometimes months. And then it's very hard to have contact with the con artist because the con artist may have taken off a long time ago. Lastly, some products promise things like increased cognitive function, virility, physical conditioning, anti-cancer properties. And as you know, older Americans make up the segment of the population most concerned about these issues. And we are a country where new cures and vaccinations for old diseases have really given us a lot of hope for a long and fruitful life. And a lot of amazing products have come out in the last few years that do add to that. So it's not so unbelievable that these products offered by con artists can do what they say they do. Okay, so having said all that, what are the most common scams to watch out for? Well, according to the National Association of Triads, Inc., which is an 18-year organization that's part of the National Sheriff's Association, and Home Instead Senior Care, there are 5 very common senior scams. So the first one you see there are prizes and sweepstake scams. This is when the older adult's been told they've won a sweepstake and all they need to do is send a check to cover the taxes. Or they receive a fake check for $5,000 and then they're encouraged to deposit the money and send back $2,000 to cover the taxes. Unfortunately, by the time it's determined that these checks, which often come from an overseas bank, are worthless, the older adult has lost his or her money. Magazine scams are where seniors order magazine subscriptions that never show up, and those are very prevalent as well. The second one you see there are home improvement frauds. This is where criminals will knock on the senior's door offering, for example, to fix their driveway. Then they paint it black and charge them $3,000. Or seniors are asked to pay up front to have their roof fixed, and they never see the alleged repairman again. The third kind of scam are phishing schemes. Seniors receive a call from someone claiming to represent a bank or some other reputable financial institution, and they sound very official, and they're warned that their financial information or credit card has been compromised, and they're asked to verify their bank account number. Now, sometimes this is more sophisticated because what they'll do is they'll say, please call this 800 number and give this information. And so the senior assumes because they're calling back and they're answering with the right, bank name and institution that they're okay, and then they give out their personal financial information. Fourth issue is internet fraud. We have a group of seniors who are quite savvy on the internet. We have another group of seniors who are still pretty unfamiliar with the internet, and they unwittingly give their credit card number to a scammer. Identity theft. We've heard a lot about identity theft in recent years, and we know seniors who give up their birth date and social security number can open up their entire financial history to a thief. So all of these are very, very common and unfortunately become more sophisticated all the time. So now that we've talked about these, let's talk about how older adults and their families can help protect them from becoming victims of these crimes. So there are things that we can suggest that will really help prevent this. First of all, we can talk to families and to older adults about watching out for unusual activity. Older adults who are scammed may be embarrassed and try to hide what's happened. So watching for changes in their lifestyle as well as any other unusual financial or business activity is really key here. So this is about watching the older adult from the standpoint is, have they changed? Is something going on? Do they seem anxious or uncomfortable? And having the family be aware enough to be able to talk about that. Another thing families can do is really be on guard for individuals who've befriended their older parent. Now, obviously this has to be done in a respectful manner, one that recognizes the parent is an adult who's free to make their own decisions and may truly have just made a new friend, but it's being aware if this seems unusual. And you know, we need to encourage people to kind of listen to their guts on these things. If something seems off, it's worth checking into. So again, we're thinking about a parent who may be isolated or lonely and thus more vulnerable to con crimes. And then someone befriends them and provides them with companionship. Now, if an adult child has concerns or suspicions, they might ask to talk to their parent's new friend. They could ask the parent, could I meet them? I'd like to meet them. Find out more about them. We know that if the person is not reputable, they're not going to stick around for very long to talk to the adult child. A third thing is that the older adult or his family should investigate organizations looking for money. I know that this is so tempting, and I remember when my dad was alive, he was getting endless requests for money and was sending as many as he could, $10, which every month, which started to get very, very expensive. And I really encouraged him to step back and look at those organizations and to think about whether or not those were organizations he wanted to support. And he then voluntarily started weaning some of those out and saying, you know, I want to concentrate on these that really matter to me. And I think that made him feel more in control and also less guilty about not donating to every organization. So either the older adult or their family members can check out those organizations by requesting written information on the organization and reviewing it thoroughly. Fourth, another thing you can do, it's quite common for family members, as we know, to assist older adults with their finances over time. So if an older adult can no longer handle his or her finances, or you're suspecting that when you're meeting with them, you could really encourage them and their family member to put a plan in place that can help ensure that bills are paid on time, that assets are protected, and that plan may include encouraging the older adult to designate a financial power of attorney. But being aware there may be something going on, and as we know, often people are much more open to us as professionals making recommendations than they are to their adult children. A fifth thing you can do is encourage older adults and their families to destroy information that could be compromised. So that means shredding all the financial information, credit card offers, all of those things before putting them in the trash. And then 6, seek out a second set of eyes. If a family member lives long distance from their aging parent or they can't always be there, encourage them to help their aging parents build a support network. That could be neighbors, friends, trusted church members, or professional caregivers like those from Home Instead Senior Care can provide that role. Another great organization is called SALT, which stands for Seniors and Law Enforcement Together. There are local chapters designed to bring together senior volunteers, local law enforcement, and the community. They have 17,000 volunteers who go into the homes and organizations of older adults to talk about safety, and that may be helpful for one of your clients. Okay, so now let's talk about what older adults and families can do if they think they have been a victim of a scam. So if a caregiver suspects that their senior loved one has become the victim of a scam, there are several things they should do. First of all, contact the local law enforcement agency where their parent lives and file a report. By doing that as soon as possible, they really might be able to catch the con artist and prevent other seniors from suffering the same fate. If an older parent's bank accounts or credit cards have been compromised, then they need to contact the financial firm immediately. They can cancel cards, put stop payments on checks to prevent any further loss. The FBI has a number of tips on their website to help older adults avoid all kinds of fraud. It's a wonderful place to go for this resource. So be sure to go to the FBI.gov and search on senior citizens for more details. Being aware of these common schemes will help us educate older adults and their families and help keep them ahead of the criminals and make them much less likely to fall victim to these scams. That can ease a lot of anxiety and should take a load off of both the seniors and their families' mind. Okay, let's now talk about some valuable resources you can pass on to your caregiving families. We've mentioned most of these throughout. We talked about AARP has a great spot on their website, the FBI.com that I just mentioned, and then I want to add to that the AADMM.com, American Association of Daily Money Managers, so 2 A's and 2 M's.com, and taking a look at that. All of these can be helpful. In addition, on caregiverstress.com, there's a video on financial management issues that you may find is an excellent resource for your clients, for their aging parents. So take a look at that and recommend that to them as well. Okay, let's now talk about next steps. So as you're sitting here thinking about this information that we went over, I just would encourage you to talk to their clients and their families about what's their deadline for getting all this information gathered. Really helping them have some urgency to this is important. You know, I love where Stephen Covey talks about urgent versus important. And one of the things that we know is that we tend to deal with what's urgent. And so if the phone is ringing, we pick it up because it's ringing. That feels urgent. But these sort of paper that need to be completed, documents, organization, we know it's important, but it may not feel very urgent. So I think we have to help families see this as being an urgent thing to do. Thinking about what financing options for care they should be exploring now, even if care doesn't seem to be imminent. What resources do they need to help their loved ones really organize and meet their financial obligations? And how do they help them prevent fraud? These are all things that I hope you'll think about what you can do with your clients to be more aware of having these conversations so that we can help protect older adults' money management situation right to the end of their lives and hopefully help preserve their independence at the same time, because that's what all of us want, is to stay independent and in control of our lives forever. And money management is a key aspect of that. I'm now going to turn this back to Steve, and Mary Alexander is going to join us, and we're going to handle some questions from you.
Fantastic presentation, Amy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as you can see from the slide up on your screen, it is time for the Q&A portion of today's web seminar. So please text in those questions to us, and we will pose them to Dr. Amy, as well as Mary Alexander from Homestead, who is joining us for the Q&A portion of the session. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Okay, so if you are ready, let's jump right into the questions, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first one is about long-term care insurance. Is the insurance usable in another country by a U.S. citizen?
My recommendation would be to talk to the insurance agent who has either issued that policy or call the company directly, because that is a very specific question that I don't have the expertise to answer, and every policy is different. Mary, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. There's so many different policies out there. If you have a cash type policy and you're able to trigger the policy to start 2 ADLs, cognitive issues, normally they'll write you a check if it's a cash policy. If not, there's a lot of specific issues, like you have to be cared for by someone with a license in a particular state. So a lot of nuances, but there is an 800 number normally on the last page of every policy that will take you right to their care coordination services.
Okay, next question. Can someone other than a spouse be the POA and executor?
Absolutely. Mary? Sorry, Mary.
Yeah, I was going to say absolutely as well. You can have anyone as your POA or executor. And, I think in the world in which we live in, you're also starting to see co-POAs and co-executors of wills.
Okay. Amy, earlier we were talking about the financial management teams and you know, the individuals that you might need to rope in to manage the finances. Can you give us a general idea on what this might cost for an actual individual to undertake this?
To have that kind of a team?
Yes.
You know, it's so varied and individualized that there's no way to make a sweeping comment on that, because a lot of it has to do with the complexity of someone's financial situation. It has to do with you know, the amount of income they have. So there are a lot of things to consider in that. You know, as a rule of thumb, obviously the less complex things are, the less expensive it is. But what you can do is, from anybody you're considering to put on that team, is to ask for their rates, how they work, how long they anticipate something will take, so there are no surprises.
Okay, and so, as sort of a follow-up to that, the next question is, I work for a nonprofit senior organization, and many of our clients are low income and can't afford to hire one, let alone all of the financial teams we've been talking about. Do you have any suggestions or maybe priorities for lower income seniors to be able to access such assistance?
You know, this is Mary. I think that there's a lot of different community-type resources that will help you with these. I mean, I know that the financial planner that I go to, they do some pro bono work for clients that can't afford, you know, don't have a lot of resources. There's also some community groups. You know, veterans groups also help with some of these things. You've got, you know, offices on aging that might be able to direct you to some resources. So there are some community-type resources out there. Also check with your local, if you happen to have a local church or religious affiliation. A lot of times they'll have some members of the congregation that can assist in some way. So you kind of have to be a little bit of a detective, but services are out there and guidance is out there.
Great answer, and Mary, that is exactly what I was going to say as far as the community groups. I mean, there are resources out there. The hard part is, you know, I think, as Mary's saying, you have to be a detective. It just takes a little bit more work to get at them.
Okay, the next question, and this might be a little bit of a tough one. Question is, if a loved one is unwilling to accept help, but you know for a fact that there's a problem with them handling their finances, is conservatorship the only other option, or are there other possible options to explore?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the only option. It's a good option. I don't know that that's the only option. Amy?
Yeah, I am not sure if that's the only option either. And I would tell you that if I had a concern and wasn't sure, I would call Adult Protective Services if I thought that the person was potentially at harm, you know, from this, because that Adult Protective Services is part of the Adult Services Unit of the Department of Social Services. Their goal is to obviously, you know, keep people safe, and you could at least get an answer for that.
Well, and they're going to assign a caseworker as well once you go that route.
That's
and
right.
They're going to be able to kind of help maneuver through what you need.
Okay, this next one is not really more a question, but more of a comment, and we do like to pass on some helpful information if the attendees have one. Comment is, in the list of the financial team members that we were going over early, we skipped a key member, the Daily Money Manager. These are professionals who attend to bills and other day-to-day financial concerns that the other professionals don't want to deal with. The DMM is the glue that holds the financial team together. So just wanted to
And that was actually the website that I gave a couple of times. It's AADMM. So that's what I was referring to. And they are fabulous, and and one of the nice things about them is they tend to be less expensive than going to, you know, a certified professional accountant or a level that people don't need when they just need the day-to-day. So that is that website, AADMM.
AADM.com.
Yeah, 2 A's and 2 M's.
Okay, AADM.com for everyone.
No, AADMM, Steve, 2 M's.
AADMM, okay.
You got it, yep.
Okay, great. Okay, next question. My elderly father-in-law was contacted by a con artist using a scam. Fortunately, he didn't send money. When he reported it to the local law enforcement, they told him that there was nothing they could do about it. You were talking earlier, Amy, about how to avoid falling victim to scams like this, and it seems like this gentleman was able to dodge a bullet. But what would you recommend in a situation like this where, there was a potential situation and perhaps law enforcement isn't willing to investigate it? Do you have any information on maybe getting the word out, or what should someone do in this situation?
Mary, do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I'll tell you that we run into this quite often in our business. So there's a couple things. It depends on how the potential fraud came to you. If it came through any type of mail, you contact the Postmaster General. There's also some other agencies. I'd also let the Area Office on Aging know. You can also talk with your local TV stations. A lot of them have like a helpline or a senior line or an investigation line that they are willing to look into these things. So think about who in your marketplace or who in your community can help get the message out. The challenge becomes seniors and their families don't want anyone to know because they're embarrassed. It could have potentially happened to them. So the only way that someone like a news station or radio station is going to kind of investigate this and look into it is if they can get someone on camera and actually do a story. So again, there's pros and cons to everything, but there are places that you can go. Again, Postmaster General does help. Better Business Bureau, most of them have a senior group. So again, playing the detective role is key in that.
Okay, and we've got a couple comments on that too here from people who are writing in. In Florida, there's a Seniors versus Crime and the Chief Financial Officer does investigate and will assist with fraud issues. And we have a second comment from someone in Idaho. We refer folks to the AG's office, Department of Consumer Affairs. So those are some helpful tips as well. Also as well, Mary, you mentioned if it came through the mail, the USPS is a federal agency, and they take mail fraud very seriously. Everybody thinks that they can fool around with the post office, but it is a federal agency, and they take those type of situations very seriously. So I did want to point that out too. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. The next question here. There are certified care managers who bring together various teams, and they can also help remove adult children from awkward roles. Are you aware of certified care managers? Can you just talk about them a little bit? Do you have any insight on those?
I'm a big supporter of them. Not everyone can afford to hire someone, but if they can, I assume they're referring to geriatric care managers, and the website for that is caremanager.org. And you can do a search based on your locality with, I think it's your zip code you put in there. And those folks usually have years and years of experience in working with aging families and can be very helpful in helping to put services together. They're very helpful in doing many, many things related to senior care. And Mary, I'm sure, has something to add to that.
Yeah, it seems like if you have interesting family dynamics, or if you're in a long-distance caregiving situation, or simply, the adult children don't have the either the time or just maybe you have a complex situation. Care managers are fantastic, and the great news is they're already plugged in to so many community resources and can kind of navigate this maze for you. So they become the care advocate for you, and things tend to move along pretty quickly when you hire them. So if you have the ability, it's simply a great service.
All right, well, we are just about out of time for today's webinar, but I want to thank our presenters, Dr. Amy Dupree and Mary Alexander, for another fantastic presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.